Ji-won stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Coalition Academy, her silver skin gleaming under the artificial lights. Around her, hundreds of alien cadets from across the galaxy gathered for the partnership ceremony. She held her head high, confident that she would be paired with someone worthy of her skills. After all, she had scored the highest marks in combat among all the new recruits. The academy was the most prestigious military training facility in known space. Only the best warriors from each species earned the right to study here. Ji-won had trained her entire life for this moment. Her people, the Valkyrie, were known throughout the galaxy for their psychic abilities and superior combat skills. She had never lost a fight back home. Commander Thalax, a massive creature with 4 arms and deep purple skin, stepped onto the platform. His voice boomed across the hall. The partnership assignments would be permanent. Each pair would train together, fight together, and graduate together. Or fail together. Ji-won listened as names were called. One by one, cadets walked forward to meet their partners. She watched as elite warriors paired with other elite warriors. Her name had not been called yet, which meant something special was planned for her. Perhaps they were saving the best for last. Finally, Commander Thalax called her name. Ji-won walked forward with grace, her confidence radiating with each step. She reached the platform and waited for her partner to be announced. When the name came, she barely recognized it. Minho, a human. Her heart sank. A human? Humans were barely considered worthy of academy admission. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. Most species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. This had to be a mistake. A figure approached from the other side of the hall. He was shorter than Ji-won, with dark hair and plain features. He wore the standard academy uniform, which somehow looked unremarkable on him. His build was average, nothing like the muscular warriors of other species. He walked with quiet steps, not the confident stride of a trained fighter. Minho reached the platform and offered a polite nod. Ji-won stared at him with barely concealed disgust. This was who they paired her with. This fragile creature who looked like he might break in a strong wind. The ceremony continued with other announcements, but Ji-won heard none of it. She was too busy seething with anger. As soon as they were dismissed, she marched straight to Commander Thalax's office. She demanded to speak with him immediately. The commander looked up from his desk with his 4 eyes, each one studying her carefully. Ji-won stated her complaint. There must have been an error in the pairing system. She requested a new partner, someone more suited to her skill level. Commander Thalax's expression did not change. He explained that the pairings were final. They were chosen carefully based on compatibility assessments that went beyond simple combat scores. Ji-won would work with Minho, or she would leave the academy. There would be no exceptions. Ji-won left the office, fury building inside her. She found Minho in the training commons, sitting quietly and reading from a data tablet. She approached him with heavy steps, not bothering to hide her anger. She told him directly that she had no interest in carrying a weak partner through training. Humans were primitives who had barely left their home planet before stumbling onto the galactic stage. Everyone knew humans were fragile, slow, and possessed no special abilities. She would do what was necessary to graduate, but he should stay out of her way. Minho looked up from his tablet. His dark eyes met hers calmly. He said nothing for a moment, just studied her face. Then he spoke in a quiet voice. He understood her concerns. He would do his best not to be a burden. Perhaps they could start fresh and see how training went. His calm response only irritated Ji-won more. She had expected him to argue or show some backbone. Instead, he just accepted her insults like they meant nothing. She wondered if humans even had pride. The next morning, they faced their first training simulation. The scenario was simple enough. Infiltrate an enemy facility, retrieve classified data, and escape without being detected. Most partnership teams took 4 to 6 hours to complete it successfully. G1 entered the simulation chamber with a plan already formed in her mind. She would handle everything herself. Minho could follow behind and watch how a real warrior operated. She told him to stay back and not interfere unless absolutely necessary. The simulation began. Ji-won used her psychic abilities to sense the guards' positions. She moved through the virtual facility with practiced ease, avoiding detection. Behind her, she could hear Minho's footsteps, quieter than she expected but still present. Halfway through the mission, Ji-won encountered a locked security door. She began working on the electronic lock, her psychic powers interfacing with the system. It would take 2 minutes to bypass. She told Minho to keep watch, but Minho stepped forward. He suggested a different approach. If she could sense where the guards were, he could create a distraction in another section. That would pull security away from this area, giving them an easier path to the objective. G1 snapped at him. She did not need his ideas. She had everything under control. Minho stepped back without argument, and Ji-won returned to the lock. She bypassed the security and moved forward. The data terminal was just ahead. But as she approached, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed. She had triggered a silent alarm somehow. Virtual guards swarmed their position from all directions. Ji-won fought them off with her combat skills and psychic blasts, but there were too many. She shouted for Minho to help, but in her earlier arrogance, she had not explained any fallback plans to him. They had no coordination. Within minutes, both of them were tagged by simulation weapons. Mission failed. They exited the simulation chamber to find Commander Thalax waiting. His expression showed disappointment. He told them that their performance was among the worst he had seen in years. The mission had a hidden layer of security that required 2 people working in perfect coordination to bypass. One person attempting it alone would always trigger the alarm. They had failed because they had not worked together at all. G1 felt shame burning in her chest. She looked at Minho, ready to blame him for distracting her or not helping properly. But before she could speak, Commander Thalax continued. The failure was on Ji-won. Leadership meant understanding your team's strengths and using them. Instead, she had treated her partner as a liability before even learning what he could do. The commander dismissed them. They had 3 more simulations to pass before the end of the week. If they failed 2 more, they would both be removed from the academy. Ji-won walked away in silence. Behind her, Minho followed at a respectful distance. She could feel his presence, patient and quiet. Part of her wanted to continue blaming him, but a small voice in her mind whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong to judge him so quickly. She pushed the thought away. Humans were weak. Everyone knew that. This was just a bad training day. She would do better tomorrow, and she would prove that she did not need a human partner to succeed. What Ji-won did not know was that Minho had noticed a hidden security layer within the first minute of the simulation. He had tried to warn her, but she had not been willing to listen. He had watched her trigger the alarm, knowing it would happen, unable to stop it because she had ordered him to stay back. Minho said nothing about any of this. He simply followed his partner, patient and watchful, waiting for the moment when she might finally be ready to listen. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Krava 7, a hostile moon selected for survival training. Ji-won stared out the window at the gray landscape below. Jagged rocks stretched as far as she could see, broken only by pools of toxic vapor and crystalline formations that glowed with an eerie blue light. 7 days. She and Minho had to survive 7 days on this wasteland with only basic supplies. Every cadet pair faced this test. Most succeeded. Some had to be rescued. A few had died over the years. Though the academy did not advertise that fact, Ji-won glanced at Minho, who sat quietly checking his equipment. 2 weeks had passed since their first simulation failure. They had completed the required training scenarios after that, but barely. Ji-won still did most of the work, still planned every strategy herself. Minho followed her orders without complaint, which somehow irritated her more than if he had argued. The ship landed with a heavy thud. The exit ramp lowered, and harsh wind rushed into the cabin. Commander Thalax's voice came through the speaker. 7 days. No contact with the academy unless facing immediate death. Survive, and they pass. Fail, and they go home in disgrace. Ji-won grabbed her pack and walked down the ramp. The gravity here was heavier than she was used to, making each step feel weighted. The air was breathable but smelled of sulfur and metal. Behind her, she heard Minho adjusting his pack and following. She had already decided on their strategy. They would find shelter in one of the cave systems marked on their map. She would hunt for food, using her psychic abilities to sense nearby creatures. Minho would gather water and maintain their camp. Simple, efficient. She would handle the dangerous tasks, while he did basic support work. They hiked for 3 hours before finding a suitable cave. It was shallow but dry, with good visibility of the surrounding area. Ji-won declared this their base and ordered Minho to start a fire while she scouted the perimeter. The first 2 days passed without incident. Ji-won hunted small creatures that tasted terrible but provided calories. Minho purified water from a nearby stream using the filtration kit. They barely spoke except for necessary communication. At night, they took turns keeping watch. On the 3rd day, everything changed. Ji-won was tracking what her scanner indicated was a large food source. The signal showed a creature about 200 meters away, moving slowly. She crept forward through the crystalline rocks, confident in her hunting skills. The creature came into view. It was massive, easily 3 times her height, with 6 legs and a body covered in sharp crystal plates. Its head swiveled in her direction, and dozens of small eyes focused on her position. Ji-won froze. This was not a prey animal. This was an apex predator. The creature charged. Its speed was shocking for something so large. Joan raised her hands and released a psychic blast, the kind that would stun most beings instantly. The energy wave hit the creature's crystal hide and scattered harmlessly. The crystals were natural psychic insulators. Ji-won ran. Behind her, the creature's footsteps thundered against the ground. She could hear its breathing, a sound like grinding stone. She leaped over rocks and slid down an embankment, using every bit of her athletic ability to maintain distance. Then she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. More footsteps. More breathing. She glanced back and saw 5 more creatures emerging from behind the crystalline formations. She had run straight into their hunting pack. The creatures surrounded her, cutting off escape routes. Ji-won backed against a large boulder, her mind racing. Her psychic attacks were useless against them. Her physical weapons were in her pack back at camp. She had nothing but a small knife. The creatures began closing in. Ji-won prepared to fight, knowing she would lose. At least she would die as a warrior should, facing her enemies head-on. A rock flew through the air and struck the nearest creature in the eye cluster. The beast roared and turned. Ji-won saw Minho standing on top of a rock formation, 30 meters away. He held another rock in his hand. She wanted to scream at him to run, but the creatures were already moving toward him. Minho jumped down from the rocks and ran. Not away from the creatures, but parallel to them. He was leading them away from Ji-won. 2 creatures peeled off to chase this new target, but 4 remained focused on Ji-won. She prepared for the attack, but then something unexpected happened. The creatures suddenly jerked their heads around. Loud sounds echoed from multiple directions. It took Ji-won a moment to realize Minho was throwing rocks against the crystalline formations, creating echoes and confusion that the creature's simple minds could not track so many sounds. They scattered, each chasing different noises. In the confusion, Ji-won ran toward Minho's position. She found him behind a cluster of rocks, breathing hard. Before she could speak, one of the creatures rounded the corner. It had tracked them after all. The beast lunged at Minho. What happened next seemed impossible. Minho did not run. He stepped forward, inside the creature's reach. His movements were precise and fast, faster than any human should be able to move. He grabbed one of the crystal plates on the creature's leg and used the creature's own momentum to redirect it. The beast crashed into the rock wall beside them. Before it could recover, Minho picked up a sharp piece of broken crystal and drove it into the soft joint between the creature's plates. The beast shrieked and fled, injured and confused that another creature attacked from the other side. Minho moved again with that same impossible speed. He ducked under its attack, rolled to the side, and kicked a loose rock into the creature's face. The beast stumbled, and Minho grabbed Ji-won's arm. They ran together through a narrow passage between rocks. The creatures were too large to follow. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, they emerged in a different area. No creatures followed. Ji-won collapsed against a rock, her body shaking. Minho knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. She had twisted her ankle during the run and had deep cuts on her arms from the sharp crystals. She had not even felt them during the chase. Minho cleaned her wounds with water from his canteen. His hands were steady despite the ordeal they had just survived. He wrapped her ankle with bandages from his emergency kit and helped her to her feet. They needed to find shelter before more creatures found them. They walked for an hour, Ji-won leaning on Minho for support. He found a small cave, almost too small to notice, tucked under an overhang. Inside was dry and secure. He helped her sit down and gave her water. Ji-won stared at him as he worked to start a small fire. Her mind was full of questions. How had he moved so fast? Where had he learned those fighting techniques? How had a supposedly weak human survived an attack that should have killed him? Minho noticed her staring. He said they should rest. Tomorrow they would need to relocate to a safer area. Ji-won opened her mouth to demand answers, but her body was exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by crushing fatigue. She fell asleep watching Minho keep watch at the cave entrance. In her dreams, she saw him fighting the creatures again. But this time, she saw it clearly. The speed, the precision, the complete lack of fear in his eyes. When she woke the next morning, her ankle felt better. Minho had applied some kind of medicine from his kit that reduced the swelling. He had also caught food and purified water while she slept. Ji-won sat up slowly. Minho was checking their supplies, preparing for the day's journey. She called his name. He turned to face her. She asked him directly how he had done what he did yesterday. That speed, those movements, they were not normal. They were not human. Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply that he got lucky. The creatures had been confused by the echoes, and he had used that confusion. Nothing more. Ji-won knew he was lying. But she also knew he was not ready to tell her the truth. Not yet. She nodded slowly and accepted his explanation. For now, they spent the next 4 days completing their survival training. Ji-won noticed things she had missed before. Minho never seemed tired, even after hours of hiking. His reflexes during their sparring practice were faster than her own. Other students at the academy treated him with unusual respect, not the dismissal one would expect for a human. Something was different about Minho. Something important. And Ji-won was determined to discover what it was. 3 weeks after their survival training, Ji-won finally confronted Minho. She found him in the academy library, studying tactical manuals in one of the private rooms. She entered without knocking and locked the door behind her. Inho looked up from his reading but said nothing. He simply waited, that same calm patience in his eyes. Jiwan sat down across from him. She told him she had been doing research. She had tried to access human military records, information about Earth's defenses, details about human combat capabilities. Everything was classified. Not just restricted, but classified at the highest levels of coalition security. Even top academy instructors could not access those files. She asked him why. Why would a primitive species that just joined the galaxy have secrets that even the coalition's military leaders protected? Minho closed his data tablet. He studied her face for a long moment, as if deciding whether she could be trusted. Finally, he spoke. He asked if she really wanted to know. Because once he told her, she would be bound by the same security restrictions he lived under. She would not be able to share this information with anyone. Jiwan said she wanted the truth. She needed to understand what she had seen on that moon. Minho leaned back in his chair. He began to explain. Humans, he said, possessed an ability that made them different from almost every other known species. The Coalition had discovered it during first contact 20 years ago. A human cargo ship had been attacked by pirates near the Outer Rim. The ship was unarmed. The crew had no military training. By all logic, they should have been captured or killed easily. Instead, something extraordinary happened. When faced with death, the human crew fought back with a ferocity that shocked everyone who later reviewed the security footage. 5 cargo workers defeated 12 armed pirates using improvised weapons and their bare hands. They moved faster than their bodies should have allowed. They ignored injuries that would have incapacitated other species. They fought like demons, never stopping until every pirate was either dead or unconscious. The Coalition studied the survivors afterward. They discovered what human scientists had suspected, but never fully understood. Humans possessed what was now called adaptive surge. Under extreme stress or mortal danger, the human body could temporarily exceed its normal limitations. Strength increased. Speed increased. Pain tolerance increased. Even mental processing accelerated, allowing split-second tactical decisions that normally took minutes to calculate. Jiwan listened in stunned silence. Minho continued. The ability evolved from Earth's harsh history. Humans were not apex predators on their homeworld. They were prey animals that learned to hunt. For millions of years, humans survived by pushing their bodies beyond normal limits, running for days to chase food, fighting predators that were stronger and faster, enduring injuries and starvation and continuing to move forward. The adaptive surge was not magic. It was evolution's answer to constant danger. When a human brain detected a life-threatening situation, it released a chemical cocktail that unlocked the body's full potential. Most species never needed such an ability because they had natural weapons or defenses. Humans had nothing but their minds and bodies, so their bodies learned to do the impossible. The Coalition, Minho explained, was terrified when they discovered this. They realized humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had assumed. A species that could become temporarily superhuman under stress was a species that could threaten the entire galactic order. So they made a deal with Earth's government. Humans could join the Coalition, but information about adaptive surge would be classified. Other species could not know. Humans would be portrayed as weak and primitive, encouraged to remain humble and unthreatening. In exchange, Earth gained access to advanced technology and protection from hostile aliens. Minho stopped talking. He watched Jiwan process the information. She sat frozen, her mind racing. Everything she knew about humans was wrong. They were not weak. They were not primitive. They were possibly the most dangerous species in the galaxy, hiding behind a mask of humility. She asked Minho about himself. Was he normal for a human, or was he special? Minho admitted he was part of a program. Some humans had stronger adaptive surge potential than others. He had been identified young as someone whose ability was particularly powerful. He had been trained by Earth's military to control the surge, to activate it consciously instead of waiting for his body to do it automatically. That was what G1 had seen on the moon. Minho had triggered a controlled surge when the creatures attacked. Not full power, just enough to survive. He had been holding back and training to avoid drawing attention. G1 felt betrayed. She asked why he had let her mock him, insult him, treat him like he was worthless. Why had he not defended himself? Minho's expression was sad. He said that was the burden humans carried. They had to endure the prejudice, the dismissal, the contempt. Because if other species knew the truth, they might see humanity as a threat. There might be war. Millions could die. So humans like Minho stayed quiet and let others think they were weak. G1 stood up and paced the room. She felt shame burning in her chest. She had been exactly the kind of person the coalition feared. She had judged Minho based on appearance and assumptions. She had never given him a chance to prove himself. Before she could apologize, alarms blared throughout the academy. Red lights flashed. An announcement came over the speakers. Code Black. All cadets to combat stations immediately. Code Black meant one thing: a real attack simulation where instructors would test cadets under conditions as close to actual combat as possible. Students had been seriously injured during Code Black exercises before. Some had died. G1 and Minho ran to the designated combat zone, a mock spaceship interior in the Academy's largest training facility. Dozens of other cadet pairs were already there, taking positions behind cover. Instructors in full combat gear moved through the shadows, armed with weapons set to deliver painful but non-lethal shocks. The exercise began without warning. Instructors attacked from multiple angles. Energy blasts filled the air. Cadets fell as they were hit, their suits marking them as eliminated. Chaos erupted as teams scrambled to work together. G1 found cover behind a cargo container. Minho was beside her. She could hear students screaming as they were hit. This was more intense than any training they had done before. 3 instructors appeared at the end of their corridor. They advanced with military precision, weapons raised. J1 tried to use her psychic abilities to sense their next moves, but they wore psionic dampeners. She was blind. The instructors opened fire. G1 rolled behind better cover. She heard Minho move beside her. They were pinned down with nowhere to retreat. One of the instructors rushed their position. G1 prepared to fight, but Minho stepped forward first. She saw his eyes change. They became focused, sharp, predatory. His entire body language shifted from calm to deadly in an instant. The instructor fired at point-blank range. Minho twisted aside, the shot missing by centimeters. He closed the distance in a heartbeat and disarmed the instructor with a move so fast G1 barely saw it. The instructor fell, eliminated. The other 2 instructors attacked together. What G1 witnessed next would stay with her forever. Minho moved like water, like shadow, like death itself. He flowed between their attacks, never where they aimed, always where they did not expect. His strikes were precise and devastating. Within seconds, both instructors were down, but more instructors appeared. 5, then 8, then 12. They surrounded Minho and G1's position. G1 fought beside him, but she could barely keep up. Minho moved through the attackers like a force of nature. He did not seem tired. He did not seem afraid. He was something beyond human in that moment. The objective marker appeared on their displays. The mission goal was at the far end of the facility. They had to reach it while under fire from dozens of instructors. Most teams had already been eliminated. Minho told Ji-won to follow him. He moved forward as she ran behind him. He cleared a path through the chaos, disabling instructor after instructor. Ji-won provided cover fire with her weapon, taking down targets Minho could not reach. They reached the objective with only 2 other teams. Minho secured the goal, and the exercise ended. Lights came on. The fallen instructors and students stood up, checking their equipment. Ji-won turned to Minho. He was bent over, breathing hard, sweat covering his face. His hands were shaking. He looked exhausted in a way she had never seen before. She understood then. The adaptive surge was powerful, but it came with a cost. It burned through the body's resources like fire. Minho had pushed himself to his limits to protect her and complete the mission. She put her hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her, and she saw pain in his eyes. Not physical pain, but something deeper. The pain of always hiding, always holding back, always being something less than what he was. Ji-won made a decision in that moment. She would never underestimate Minho again. More than that, she would stand beside him as an equal partner. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. The change in their partnership was immediate and obvious. During strategy sessions, Ji-won now asked for Minho's input before making decisions. During combat training, they moved as a coordinated unit instead of Ji-won leading with Minho following. Other cadets noticed the difference. Within 2 weeks, Ji-won and Minho became the top-performing pair in their class. Ji-won found herself fascinated by human history. She spent hours in the library reading about Earth's past. What she discovered both horrified and amazed her. Humans had spent most of their existence fighting, not just against other species, but against each other. Their planet's history was written in blood and survival. She read about wars that killed millions. She read about humans crossing frozen wastelands and burning deserts just to find new homes. She read about soldiers who kept fighting even when victory was impossible, simply because surrender was not in their nature. One story particularly struck her. During Earth's Second World War, a group of human soldiers had been surrounded by enemies in a frozen forest. They were outnumbered 5-1. They had no supplies and no hope of rescue. Military logic said they should surrender. Instead, they fought for weeks in sub-zero temperatures, eating bark and snow, until relief forces finally reached them. When asked why they did not give up, one soldier simply said, "Giving up never occurred to them." Ji-won shared this story with Minho during a training break. He smiled sadly. That, he said, was the human condition. They were too stubborn to know when they should quit, but beneath their growing friendship, Ji-won sensed something was troubling Minho. He seemed watchful, always observing their instructors with careful attention. Sometimes, she caught him reviewing security footage from the academy's public areas. When she asked what he was looking for, he would change the subject. One night, 3 months into their training, Minho came to her quarters after curfew. His expression was serious. He told her they needed to talk somewhere private, somewhere without surveillance. They met in an unused storage room in the academy's lower levels. Minho activated a jamming device that would prevent any recording or monitoring. Ji-won had never seen him this tense before. Minho told her he had been investigating something. Several human students had died at the academy over the past 5 years. The official reports called them training accidents. But Minho had reviewed the incident reports in detail. The accidents were too convenient, too perfectly timed. In each case, the human student had been performing exceptionally well just before their death. He believed someone at the academy was murdering human students. Not random violence, but calculated assassinations designed to look like accidents. Someone was testing human limits by putting them in increasingly dangerous situations until they died. Ji-won felt cold, fear crawl up her spine. She asked if he had proof. Minho admitted he did not have enough yet, but he had found patterns. Certain instructors were present at each incident. Training scenarios had been modified just before the accidents, always in ways that increased danger. Equipment malfunctions happened at suspiciously perfect moments. He suspected a conspiracy within the coalition itself, a faction that wanted to either weaponize humans or eliminate them before they became too powerful. The faction had infiltrated the academy to study human capabilities and remove those who became too dangerous. G1 asked why he was telling her this. Minho looked at her with complete trust in his eyes. He said he needed someone he could rely on. Someone who knew the truth about humans and would not panic. Someone strong enough to help him expose the conspiracy. She felt the weight of his trust. She asked what they should do. Go to the academy leadership? Contact coalition authorities? Minho shook his head. He believed the conspiracy reached into the academy's leadership. If they reported their suspicions through normal channels, the evidence might be destroyed, and they might become the next accidents. They needed to gather absolute proof first, enough that it could not be ignored or buried. Over the next weeks, they worked together in secret. G1 used her access to different areas of the academy to observe instructors. Minho analyzed training schedules and equipment logs. They met only in secure locations, always careful to avoid suspicion. What they discovered was worse than either had imagined. 3 senior instructors were definitely involved. They had been modifying training scenarios for years, creating situations designed to push human students beyond their limits. When a human student triggered their adaptive surge too many times, becoming too powerful or too aware of their abilities, an accident would be arranged. But the instructors were not working alone. G1 found communications between one instructor and someone off-world. The messages were encrypted, but she managed to decode enough to identify the sender. Admiral Corvin, a high-ranking coalition officer known for his anti-human views. The scope of the conspiracy became clear. It was not just about the academy. It was about controlling or eliminating humanity before they could become a major power in the galaxy. The academy was just a testing ground, a place to study humans and remove the most dangerous ones before they could graduate and enter the broader military. G1 and Minho now faced an impossible choice. If they did nothing, more humans would die. But if they acted, they would be going against some of the most powerful people in the coalition. They were just cadets. Who would believe them? Minho told her about the upcoming graduation ceremony. In 2 weeks, all graduating cadets would participate in a ceremonial flight on a coalition cruiser. It was a tradition that symbolized their entry into active service. He suspected the conspiracy would use that ceremony to stage a massive accident that would kill all graduating human students at once. G1 felt sick. She asked how he knew. Minho showed her what he had found. Equipment manifests of the ceremonial cruiser had been modified. Safety protocols had been quietly altered. The Admiral himself would be attending the ceremony, which was unusual. They had 2 weeks to stop whatever was planned. 2 weeks to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of coalition power. 2 weeks to save not just human students, but possibly the entire future of human-alien relations. G1 looked at Minho. She saw the burden he carried. The knowledge that his people were being hunted simply for being too dangerous. She made her choice in that moment. She told him she was with him completely. Whatever they had to do, they would do it together. Minho's expression showed relief and gratitude. He admitted he was scared. This was bigger than anything he had trained for. But with her help, they might have a chance. They began planning. They could not stop the ceremony without solid proof. They needed to catch the conspirators in the act, gather evidence that could not be denied, and expose everything before it was too late. G1 suggested they document everything they found. create multiple copies, and hide them in secure locations. If something happened to them, the evidence would still exist. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked constantly. Ji-won barely slept. She gathered testimony from human students who had noticed strange patterns in their training. She recorded conversations with instructors using hidden devices. She built a case piece by piece. Minho focused on the technical side. He analyzed the modifications to the ceremonial cruiser and discovered the plan. The ship's power core would be sabotaged to fail during the ceremony. The failure would be catastrophic, but looked like a terrible accident. Everyone on board would die. 3 days before graduation, they had enough evidence. Ji-won wanted to take it to Commander Thalax, one of the few senior officers they believed was not involved in the conspiracy. But Minho hesitated. He worried that even Thalax might be compromised, or that going through official channels would give the conspirators time to cover their tracks. They argued for hours. Finally, they reached a compromise. They would attend the ceremony as planned. Ji-won would organize an evacuation of human students using a code word they would spread beforehand. Minho would confront the conspirators directly and force a confession while recording everything. It was risky. It was probably stupid, but it was the only plan they had. The night before graduation, Ji-won found Minho on the Academy's observation deck, staring out at the stars. She stood beside him in silence. He spoke quietly, thanking her for believing him, for standing with him when she could have chosen safety. Ji-won told him she should be thanking him. He had taught her that strength was not about power or pride. It was about enduring, about protecting others, about doing what was right, even when it was hard. They stood together watching the stars. 2 warriors from different worlds, preparing for a battle that would determine the future of both their peoples. Graduation day arrived with clear skies and celebration throughout the academy. Families from dozens of worlds gathered to watch their children complete their training. The ceremonial hall was decorated with flags from every coalition member species. At the center of everything sat the gleaming cruiser that would carry graduating cadets on their symbolic first flight. Ji-won wore her formal uniform, but underneath she carried 3 data chips with copies of all their evidence. She had distributed more copies to trusted human students with instructions to release them if anything went wrong. Around her, human cadets wore small blue pins on their uniforms, the signal they had agreed upon. When Ji-won gave the code word, they would evacuate immediately. Minho stood across the hall, also in formal uniform. He looked calm, but Ji-won could see the tension in his shoulders. He had located the 3 instructors involved in the conspiracy. They stood near the admiral, all 4 conspirators in one place. The ceremony began with speeches from coalition officials. They talked about duty, honor, and the bright future of cooperation between species. Ji-won barely heard the words. She was watching the conspirators, waiting for them to make their move. An hour into the ceremony, the announcement came. All graduating cadets should board the ceremonial cruiser for their traditional flight. Hundreds of students began moving toward the boarding ramps, excited and proud. Ji-won caught Minho's eye across the crowd. He nodded slightly. It was time, but before either could act, emergency doors suddenly slammed shut throughout the hall. Red emergency lights activated. A voice came over the speakers, declaring a security lockdown. No one could leave. The voice said there was a credible threat and everyone must remain in the hall for their safety. Ji-won's heart raced. This was not part of the graduation ceremony. The conspirators had changed their plan. The crowd began to panic. Parents pushed toward their children. Students tried to reach the exits, but the doors would not open. They were trapped. Then Ji-won saw them. Combat drones, dozens of them, dropping from ceiling hatches she had not known existed. These were not training drones. These were military-grade, armed with real weapons. The drones activated and began scanning the crowd. Ji-won realized with horror what was happening. The conspirators had decided to eliminate human students here, now, in front of everyone. They would blame it on a terrorist attack or equipment malfunction. In the chaos, human students would die, and no one would question it too closely. The drones opened fire. The first targets were human students. Energy blasts struck cadets who had done nothing wrong except be born human. Screams filled the hall as people scattered, desperate to find cover. Ji-won ran toward the nearest group of human students. She used her psychic abilities to create a shield, deflecting drone fire. She shouted the code word, Starfall. Human students who heard her began moving toward the service exits, away from the main crowd. Across the hall, she saw Minho moving. He ran not away from the drones, but toward the conspirators. Admiral Corvin and the three instructors stood on an elevated platform, watching the chaos with cold satisfaction. Minho reached the platform and leaped up. One of the instructors moved to stop him. What followed was too fast for most people to see. Minho engaged his adaptive surge fully, holding nothing back. He struck the instructor with devastating force, dropping him instantly. The other two instructors attacked together. They were trained warriors, each with decades of combat experience. Against a normal human, they would have won easily. But Minho was not normal, and he was not holding back anymore. He moved between their attacks like smoke. Every motion was efficient, brutal, effective. Within 30 seconds, both instructors were unconscious on the platform floor. Admiral Corvin drew his own weapon, but Minho was faster. He disarmed the admiral and forced him to his knees. Around them, security cameras captured everything. Minho had planned this. He wanted everyone to see Dot, but the drones were still attacking. Ji-won helped evacuate human students through service corridors, but there were too many drones. People were getting hurt. Some were already dead. A drone targeted a group of young children who had come to watch their parents graduate. Jae-ryun saw it happening and knew she could not reach them in time. But someone else could. Minho saw the same thing. He released Admiral Corvin and jumped from the platform. He crossed the hall in seconds, putting himself between the drone and the children. The drone fired. Multiple blasts hit Minho in the chest. Ji-won screamed. She saw Minho stagger but not fall. His adaptive surge was protecting him, his body absorbing damage that should have killed him. He grabbed the drone from the air and crushed it with his bare hands. More drones converged on his position. Minho fought them all. He was one man against dozens of military drones, and he was winning. He moved through them like a storm, destroying each one with precise strikes. His body was taking damage, but he did not stop. Could not stop. People needed him. Ji-won organized the evacuation while Minho held the drone's attention. She got human students out through service exits. She helped injured people to safety. She worked with other cadets to coordinate rescue efforts. Commander Thalax appeared from a secure location. He had not been part of the conspiracy. When he saw what was happening, he took command of the situation. He ordered security forces to help evacuate people and to arrest Admiral Corvin and the fayest Admiral Corvin and the instructors. But the final threat remained. Minho had learned the conspirators had installed explosives on the ceremonial cruiser. With everyone trapped in the hall, they had planned to detonate the ship, destroying the hall and everyone in it. The detonation sequence had already started. Someone needed to stop it. The cruiser was locked down, protected by security systems. Getting inside and disabling the explosives would be nearly impossible. It would require someone with exceptional skill, speed, and willingness to sacrifice themselves. If they failed, Minho was the only one who could do it. Ji-won saw him running toward the cruiser. She chased after him, calling his name. She caught up to him at the boarding ramp. She grabbed his arm and told him not to do this. They could evacuate everyone. They could let the cruiser explode. Minho looked at her with sad eyes. He told her there was not enough time. Too many people were still inside the hull. If the cruiser exploded, hundreds would die. He had to stop it. G1 wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She released his arm. She told him to come back. That was an order from his partner. Minho smiled. He promised to try. Then he ran into the cruiser. G1 organized a final evacuation. She got everyone she could out of the hull, moving them to safe distances. Security forces arrested the conspirators. The evidence G1 and Minho had gathered was already being transmitted to Coalition Central Command. Minutes passed. The cruiser sat silent. G1 stared at it, her body tense with fear. Beside her, other students and instructors waited in silence. Then the cruiser's lights flickered. The emergency system shut down. The explosion had been prevented, but Minho did not emerge. G1 ran toward the cruiser, despite shouts from security to stay back. She entered through the boarding ramp and found Minho in the engine room. He was collapsed beside the deactivated explosive device. His body was covered in injuries from the drone fight and from manually disabling the explosives. The effort had pushed him beyond even his adaptive surge's limits. G1 dropped to her knees beside him. She checked for life signs. He was breathing barely. She called for medical help and stayed with him until the medics arrived. The aftermath took weeks to sort through. Admiral Corvin and the instructors were arrested and faced trial. The evidence G1 and Minho gathered proved the conspiracy reached into multiple coalition departments. Dozens of officials were implicated. The truth about human adaptive surge could no longer be hidden. The security footage of Minho fighting the drones had spread across the galaxy. Everyone now knew humans were far more capable than they had pretended to be. Coalition held emergency sessions to address the revelation. Some species reacted with fear, others with respect. But Earth's government made it clear that humans wanted peace and cooperation, not conflict. The adaptive surge was a defensive ability, not an offensive weapon. Minho recovered slowly. His injuries were severe, but human resilience pulled him through. When he finally woke up in the medical ward, the first person he saw was G1. She had barely left his side during his recovery. She told him everything that had happened. The conspiracy was exposed. Human students were safe. The coalition was reforming its policies on human integration. Minho smiled weakly. He asked if they passed graduation. G1 laughed through tears. They had been awarded the highest honors the Academy could give. 3 months later, both G1 and Minho graduated in a new ceremony. This one was smaller, more sincere. No conspirators lurked in the shadows. No hidden threats waited to strike. They were assigned to work together as coalition operatives. Their mission was to continue building bridges between species, to fight prejudice wherever they found it, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. On their first day of active duty, they stood together on a coalition starship, looking out at the galaxy. G1 thought about how far she had come. She had started as an arrogant warrior who saw humans as inferior. Now she stood beside one as an equal, a friend, and a partner she would.